Good afternoon, and I'm sure that the news has hit a lot of people by now that the Biden win in the 2020 election has been officially finalized. Of course, there are still some legal challenges that remain, and there may be some recounts, but it has been officially announced now by all major news channels. And here in Chicago, where we are seeing celebrations like we saw when the Cubs won and in 2016. So there is definitely a sense of victory for the Biden-Harris supporters. And as an immigration lawyer, I can say possibly immigration advocates around the world are breathing a sigh of relief because we have been under constant stress, constant attack by the Trump immigration policies. So when we see a change, we are all hopeful that this is going to mean changes, meaningful changes in the immigration law landscape. Now, I do think that these changes will be measured, and I think that there is some, relief, of course, but also some reason for being a little bit cautious in how much we expect. And I will go through several topics right now because I really want to give everyone an update, a little bit of reflection on what the Trump administration has changed in various visa and immigration categories, and what kind of changes we might expect from the Biden-Harris administration coming forward. Also, keep in mind that just because Biden has won the election doesn't mean that Trump is no longer president. There are still number of days until the end of December where Trump is still president, and there may still be additional Trump-style policies. In fact, they may even be highly exaggerated because, this is his last chance to make an impact on one of the areas that he has particularly constantly attacked throughout his presidencies, and that is immigration in the United States. Now, who am I to give you this update? My name is Denu Maru. I'm an immigration lawyer, and my law firm is called SwagatUSA. For those of you who understand what that might mean, you already know, but for those of you who may not understand what my name, the law firm name represents, Swagat means welcome, and of course USA represents USA. So we are only an immigration law firm. We only do immigration law here. Like I mentioned, I am in Chicago, Illinois. This is our phone number. We are passionate, driven, and excited about immigration law. So if you are someone who is looking for information, looking to apply for some kind of visa or green card, feel free to give us a call. Now, I want to go through a number of topics today, and I just want to give you an idea of which topics I will be covering in my update today. So I will be talking about H1B visas. I will be talking about DACA. I will be talking about family-based immigration. And I will also be talking about asylum and border crossings in general. So if you're watching live and you're interested in one of these topics, stay tuned, okay? So like I said, let's talk about, without wasting any additional time, let's talk about H1B visas and how H1B visas have changed under the Trump administration and how they're likely to change under the Biden administration. So first of all, I think it's worth noting that Kamala Harris, who is the nominated, who is the elected, I should say, vice president, is a daughter of H1B visa holders. So her parents immigrated to the United States under the student H1B to green card cycle. And so she's a product of this visa in some sense. And so I think that's a positive news for H1B visas in general, because I think that possibly this could mean that we see a H1B visas in a different way under the Biden-Harris administration than what we have seen under the Trump administration. Now let's talk about what we have seen in the H1B visas under the Trump administration. So first of all, we all know that right now, H1B visas are subjected to an executive order banning entry until the end of December. This executive order, had Trump won, would likely have been extended. So right now, the first and the most immediate change we're likely to see under the H1B visas is that possibly this executive order will end December 31st and will not be extended when Biden and Harris take office. So for people who are waiting for who have been approved for H1Bs, but they're waiting overseas to enter, or they're waiting for getting stampings, you can now breathe a sigh of relief because this is finally coming to an end, most likely. And then the other thing that we have seen the Trump administration repeatedly attack, particularly this visa type. And we've seen attempts at fee increases. We've seen attempts at very limited interpretations of how H1B visas are deemed to be qualified or approvable. And we've also seen strong legal challenges to each of these attempts. So the kind of effect that the Trump administration has had has been a little bit limited because there has been constant pushback from the immigration law community. And we've, for example, H1B we've seen, an attempt at significant fee increases to what it costs companies to apply for an H1B holder. Now, the thing is that it already is a very high fee. So a significant fee increase over that would have made it prohibitively, would have essentially kept out a lot of the smaller businesses from ever accessing the H1B visa program. Now, we did see there has been an overnight, almost without any warning, an LCA, change. So prevailing wages. Prevailing wages are something that, is the minimum that an H1B holder has to be paid. That has, without any warning, been increased tremendously by the Trump administration. And so now what we see from the Department of Labor as the minimum wage that the H1B holder has to be paid is increased tremendously. In some cases, wages that were still pretty high. They were, the minimum wage might have been $67,000. Now we are seeing it in the upper 90s. And so this is the kind of wage increase that has happened very recently, almost overnight. I expect that this kind of wage increase will be tempered down a little bit to be more realistic. And this is the minimum wage that an H1B holder has to make, depending on their profession, depending on their locality, that the Department of Labor publishes this schedule every single year, twice a year, I think, even, to reflect the nature of the employment landscape. Also, premium processing fees have increased tremendously. Now, H1B holders, particularly people who are transferring from one company to another, have often used premium processing as a way to be able to do it so that they don't have to, oftentimes the job offer doesn't last that long. They don't have to work without knowing whether or not they would be approved. Premium processing used to be in the $1,400 range, $1,440. Now it has increased. It has increased to $2,500 for H1B holders. So it is a very significant increase, and that will impact decisions around premium processing for H1B holders, and possibly could impact their opportunities as well. I don't know if this is going to be decreased under the Biden administration. I don't expect that it's going to be something that they decrease right away, because the USCIS has been seeing a decrease in their revenues as a result of all of the restrictions that they have, been subjected to. So they're seeing a decrease in their revenues, and they're trying to make it up some way. Also, we see that H1B denials are at an all-time high. And why are so many H1Bs being denied? Because the interpretations of the rules are stricter than ever. What is considered a specialty occupation? This has been a topic that the Trump administration has constantly interpreted in the most narrow possible way. And it really does, the interpretation of specialty occupation right now really does eliminate a lot of very legitimate H1B opportunities. As an example, we've recently seen somebody with a master's degree in social work who was in a nonprofit organization helping people, low-income women in particular, didn't get denied for her H1B because they thought, well, this position is not a specialty occupation, even though by previous standards and by common sense standards, it requires a lot of specialized knowledge, and her degree would have been a perfect fit for it. But this is just an example of how narrowly they're interpreting specialty occupation. Also, there has been a lot of attack on third-party consulting firms and third-party positions, which has been also an attack on the IT industry in particular, which has grown to increasingly rely on these consulting firms for projects connected with their IT needs, as opposed to hiring direct IT workers. And so this has been, the reality of the marketplace, and it seems to have been tremendously impacted and attacked in the new rules by the Trump administration. I don't know if that's going to change right away, but we are definitely going to see the executive order change. And I think we will slowly see a more realistic interpretation of the H1B requirements as well. Okay, so that is the H1B visa. Let's talk about student visas, which is sometimes people enter on a student visa and later get an H1B visas. And student visas have really been impacted in the most recent, enforcement actions. So student visas are F1 visas. And what we see is that student visa holders particularly who are in the OPT, optional practical training program, have been targeted by some of the enforcement measures against certain companies. These companies were providing little to no training for the student hires. They were also not paying these student hires. And what we see as the enforcement measure is that we are seeing the Trump administration really target the students themselves who have, been contacted by these companies or been employed by these companies. So, latest example, but there has been a number of different attempts at whittling down, different perceived scams and scandals and stuff connected with the student visas. What we see that's a little bit shocking is that it's not the scammers only that are being punished, but the students themselves who have already had to deal with very restricted time schedules under which they have to find a job, etc. So we see that as being sort of a way to undercut legal immigration in whatever way possible. And targeting the students themselves is something that is, an unfortunate byproduct of the Trump administration's enforcement measures. Now, I also want to talk a little bit about family-based immigration. Family-based immigration looks very different now than it did 4 years ago. And that is because, in particular, because of the introduction of the form I-944. Now, what is I-944? This form is designed supposedly to eliminate people who are likely to be a public charge. Now, how does it do that? Is the part where it becomes extremely cumbersome and difficult. It requires a completely different materials, financial, supporting documents than previous immigration forms have required. Now, we've always had this standard of, like we don't allow people who the government thinks is likely to be a public charge. That standard has always been there, but it has been measured through through different, more simple measurements. And the affidavits of support forms have generally been enough to show that somebody makes a certain amount of income or is being supported by somebody else who makes that much income. Now, here is where we see the 944, they're asking for credit checks, credit reports, bank account information, all kinds of extra documents that somebody who's never been to the United States, somebody who's coming brand new to the United States, or somebody who's never been a green card holder previously is going to have a hard time getting anyway. And so this is where, the difficulty has tremendously increased for people who are looking to use the family-based immigration. Now, we do work with these visas and green cards, and we often do work with the I-944s. What has been very interesting about this particular form is that it has met with a slew of legal challenges for a number of reasons, because it's, in a way, it discriminates against elderly people who are out of work, retired, disabled people, et cetera, et cetera. And so it's met with a number of legal challenges. And in some cases, those legal challenges have been successful, but then they keep, being overturned by other courts. And so we've seen kind of a whiplash effect, whether we need 944, whether we don't need 944. So as a practitioner, this makes it a very complicated landscape to navigate. I'm interested to see how the Biden administration deals with the I-944, but my guess is that they might take it away and, use something that's a little bit more commonsensical when it comes to an immigrant who's never previously been to the United States, or an immigrant who's never had, a green card in the United States, and the age factor or their disability factor, et cetera, might be taken into consideration. So we'll see how that has changed. We've also seen family-based immigration forms tremendously change over the last few years. So there have been new questions added. There have been new, the actual versions of the forms have been transformed in the latest few years. And so that's also something to be mindful of. Also, there has been a lot of extra scrutiny on green card holders who arrive in the United States. How long have you spent abroad? When did you come here? So in every sense, we're seeing a very strict interpretation of the laws, and we're seeing that every opportunity to turn away immigrants is being utilized under the Trump administration. I'm interested to see how the family-based immigration landscape changes under the Biden administration. I expect that possibly the 944 form will be done away with, but I don't know how else those forms themselves will change. Also, it's worth noting that the Trump administration tried to severely increase fees for both family-based immigration and naturalizations. And we're talking about almost, more than double the naturalization cost, and in some cases, the family-based immigration costs. So those fee increases have been challenged, and so they're not in effect right now because there is a legal challenge against them. However, I'm interested to see if that fee increase goes through, or if we'll see a different kind of fee increase, or if any at all, in this family-based immigration area. Also, I want to talk about Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals, or DACA. DACA has been an interesting area for a number of years. Ever since President Obama introduced DACA, it was met with criticism from the right saying that, it's an executive order, it's not valid, etc. However, what we saw under the Trump administration is that Trump attempted to dismantle the DACA program. He was extremely unsuccessful, and the Supreme Court issued an order saying that the way that they went about doing it was not correct and it was not legal. And so we were, as practitioners, a little bit confused by that. Does that mean that we can go ahead and file new DACA applications or only renewals? And a number of practitioners went forward to file new DACA applications. And what we found was that new DACA applications were still not being accepted. So I'm not sure if that Supreme Court ruling is even properly being followed under the Trump administration. And for the first time that I can recall, the USCIS made a statement that the Supreme Court ruling is illegal. So that has never been the case, because we've always generally seen government agencies respect and honor the rules and laws as interpreted by the U.S. Supreme Court, but not in this instance. And we still have to see whether or not the interpretation of deferred action is ever going to be respected by the Trump administration. However, now that there's a change in the administration, this is an area where I do expect, because Biden was vice president when President Obama was president, and when President Obama introduced this program, Biden was a part of his administration. And so I expect that there will be a resurgence of the DACA program and possibly a path to green card for the DACA recipients. So this is an area that I'm very closely watching under the Biden-Harris administration. I do expect that there will be some positive news coming out about DACA. I want to talk about asylum. A lot of people are impacted by the asylum rules and the changes in asylum. And so there just has been a lot in this area. What we saw is that for the first time ever, asylum people who claimed asylum weren't even allowed to enter the United States. They were made to wait. If they were crossing the border, they were made to wait in Mexico or wherever until their asylum case was heard, which in many cases took years. And so we saw people literally in camps and tents and living in squalor until they got their fair hearing for asylum. I do expect that that will change. I do not expect that an inhumane practice like this will continue under the Biden-Harris administration. Also, we saw tremendous changes in the way that asylum applications were handled. There are also changes with regards to work permits. Now, asylees who come to the United States and they're waiting for their asylum hearing used to be able to at least work while they wait within 180 days of their entry. That has changed. That number is now 365 days. So for a whole year, asylum applicants and asylees cannot work in the United States after they come here. So I'm a little bit confused as to how they're expected to survive here if they're claiming asylum and they're not allowed to work for a whole year. And it's kind of creating a need where people will be forced to work in different ways under the table, etc. I'm hoping that this goes back to the previous rule of 180 days because it will make a big difference to asylum applicants. And also the interpretation of the rules and the laws on, how to get asylum are actually very restrictive. If somebody ever were to take a look at them, you would be surprised that people you thought would have legitimate fear of going back to their country for technical reasons often fail at getting asylum. So that's just something to keep in mind. I don't know if that's going to change in any meaningful way. Like I said, I'm a little bit cautious with how much change we can expect from the Biden-Harris administration because we also have, a Supreme Court that's very conservative. the House and the Senate are not too much in favor of some of these changes. So I don't expect sweeping changes. I should also talk about general border crossings. Now, illegal border crossings have been a topic that the Trump administration, it was a campaign promise that they would, stop illegal border crossing. And everybody remembers the wall that Mexico was supposed to pay for. Well, we do have a partial fulfillment of that promise. And so we see a partial wall, and it's not really a wall. There are slats across the southern border, for a portion of it. But Mexico is definitely not the one paying for it. It was funded by the US federal government, which in turn gets funded by the US taxpayers. So, I don't know who expected that Mexico would legitimately pay for it, but that's not happening. Do I see an increase or change in border crossing under the Biden-Harris administration? Possibly initially. I'm really curious as to how Biden will be different from the Obama administration with regards to how they treat this. Illegal immigration in general. We saw Obama actually be the deporter in chief. That's the nickname that was given to him because he deported a record number of immigrants in his presidency. And of course, Biden was a part of that administration. Now, Biden has said that he's not going to follow suit, but I'm curious to see how he's going to deal with the illegal immigration question. That is something we still really don't know. And I can't conclude this without talking about the 545 children that still have not been reunited with their parents. We have, when I say we, and I mean the Trump administration, under the Trump administration, the United States has been extremely cruel in how they have handled border crossings. So when people, were crossing the border, they were often separated from their parents, even infants, even very young children were often separated from their parents as a matter of practice. They were kept in very poor conditions. They were caged. Now, the Trump administration likes to point out that these so-called cages were created by the Obama administration, but they were not used nearly as frequently. And so it's very interesting to me that, this kind of inhumane practice was allowed to continue for a while. The judge has ordered that they be reunited with their parents, but attorneys for the children have been unable to locate the parents for 545 children. So this has been a human rights travesty, in my opinion. And that is hopefully going to end under the Biden and Harris administration. Now, I want to, of course, conclude this by sharing some general thoughts on how we see immigration law possibly changing. Like I said, I think the most prominent changes are likely to be for the DACA recipients, possibly for asylees, for border crossings. I see more humane practices being implemented. And I also expect that H1B bans and executive orders are going to be lifted. I do not expect new sweeping laws. I don't expect comprehensive immigration reform. That was something that was talked about in the Obama campaigns. It really hasn't. I haven't even heard about comprehensive immigration reform from the Biden-Harris administration as a campaign promise. And so I don't expect that that's going to happen. I don't think that Biden's going to be able to make any sweeping changes in the law. I do think there will be changes in the enforcement and in the policies, but I don't expect that there will be very big changes in the law, except for maybe a path to green card for the DACA holders. So that's what I'm hoping for, that at least we get that, and a little bit more common sense interpretation on some of the immigration applications that we file, a less attacking language for legal and illegal immigrants. I mean, it's surprising because President Trump talked so much about, being against illegal immigrants. But what has happened, as you can see, is a constant attack, not just on the illegal immigrants, on legal immigration. And so what I do expect is that, the rhetoric is going to be much more warm, much more welcoming. I expect that our policies are going to be more fair with how we interpret applications. And I expect some changes in the policies when it comes to DACA, when it comes to, more humane treatment of border cross people who are trying to cross the border, whether illegally or legally, whether asylum seekers or not. And those are some changes that I expect from the Biden-Harris administration. For now, I'm breathing a sigh of relief, but I'm also cautious because the administration hasn't changed yet. There's still a number of days before that happens, and I'm very watchful to see how the last few days of the Trump administration play out for hopeful immigrants in the US. All right, thank you so much. And again, before I conclude, I want to just remind you, this is our phone number, but it's 312-854-7065. This is my name. You can look me up. We're located in Chicago, but I have to point out we work with immigrants across the United States, all 50 states. And our whole system is designed to work with immigrants from any place at all. So, wherever you are, if you have questions about immigration, feel free to call us. If you are interested in filing an application, feel free to call us. We are only practicing in immigration law. We would be happy to help you in your immigration law matter, no matter what it is. We look for creative solutions. We look for, an aggressive pushback against these very restrictive policies. And so you will find us to be your strongest advocates if you're looking to file an application. Again, my name is Denu Maru, and thank you for being here live. I look forward to connecting with all of you on various social media platforms, here on Facebook. Also, you can follow me on other platforms like Twitter. We have LinkedIn. We have a number of other YouTube. So feel free to follow me wherever you feel most connected. So thank you very much. And I hope that this has been informative for all of you. Bye-bye.